welcome everyone to our third part of the Enhancing Wellness and Increasing Resiliency webinar series on cognitive behavioral therapy. Tonight's session is all about CBT for problem solving and positive coping mechanisms. So I really appreciate everyone taking time out of their busy weeks. I was just saying, I cannot believe that it's already December 8th. I don't know where the time goes. So yeah, really feel honored that everyone's taken some time out of their busy schedules to be here. And I hope that you are able to take away some important information from the session today. And so for those of you who are new, just a brief introduction for myself. My name is Laura. I am the research manager as well as a CBT therapist, working under the supervised practice of Dr. Jody Samra. Dr. Samra could not be here this evening. She might pop in a little bit later. Yeah, so a little bit about me, and Rebecca, our clinical manager, is here as well, just supporting me throughout. So we're open to questions at the end of the session. As a reminder, we will be recording. And so at the end of the session, we'll stop recording so that any questions that people can ask, they can ask kind of in the privacy without the recording, and we'll go from there. So in terms of our session today, we are going to start by just quickly going over some of the objectives. So Rebecca, can you let me know if your screen changes there? Good, great, awesome. So our objectives for this evening, first, we want to discuss a little bit about the 101s of self-efficacy. And so this is something that I kind of want to chat a little bit more about and go in depth a little bit more. But that's where we're going to start today. We're also going to talk a little bit about values and why they matter. We're going to start to identify perhaps some values that might resonate with you and explore kind of how those can be incorporated into your life. And then we're also going to discuss our SMART goal setting and how you can do it. It's a really great technique that we recommend to a lot of clients. Now, what we'll do to get started is we are going to start right off the bat with some poll questions. So Rebecca is going to help me here. So the first poll question, Rebecca, are you ready to run the polls here?
Yeah, okay, perfect. So first poll question, did you attend the first and second part of our webinar series on CBT? You bet I was there. I was able to attend one of them. I missed them, but enjoyed the recordings. And this is the first session I have signed up for. And then our second question, so where are you joining us from? So the Lower Mainland, Vancouver Island, Gulf Island, Okanagan, other BC regions, or elsewhere in Canada. All right. Yeah. It looks like everyone has voted. So our results, it looks like 91% of our people attending were here for both previous sessions. So welcome back, everyone. And then 1%, so the other person was able to attend one of them.
Oh, good. Welcome back for the one session that you saw. And there are recordings, so you can always go back and watch the other one that you missed. But for everyone that's been here previously, thank you so much for attending again. Really appreciate it. And so we have one other poll question for this evening. So the poll question is, I would like to ask you, we like to get these sessions started by doing a little kind of grounding technique, just to calm ourselves in the moment. And so I want to ask you, would you prefer to start our session with a 4-stage breathing exercise, which we did last session, or a body scan exercise, which we did the first session? Oh, it looks like the breathing exercise is winning out, Rebecca. All right.
No kidding.
So the breathing exercise, great, absolutely. We can start with that, and we'll keep it short and sweet because I know we want to get to the kind of the good content here. So what we will do is we will get started with the breathing exercise. So I welcome everyone to get comfortable in their chairs, in their seats, and just kind of take a moment. Maybe you have some water, some tea, grab a sip. And we'll keep this nice and short and sweet, but we also really want to check in and see, how we're doing. Oftentimes we go about our days and there's so many things that we have to check off our list, or so many things that we have to focus on that we forget to kind of tune into ourselves. So this grounding technique, we're going to do a 4-stage breathing technique. It's really beneficial when you're feeling anxious, perhaps you're having a little bit of a hard week and feeling a little bit down. Really beneficial to do as well. So I welcome everyone. You can either keep your eyes closed or your eyes open. I'm going to keep my eyes closed. And so you can sit comfortably in your chair. If you're laying down, lay comfortably and just take a moment to check in and see how your breath's going. And I know for me, I tend to be a talker, and so I typically take short, kind of shallow breaths. So we're going to just take a few moments to do a few breaths here. And then I welcome you to now, with the 4-stage breathing, just to kind of go back over what we did before. So with the 4-stage breath, we're going to take a breath in. That's part 1. And part 2, we'll take a deep breath out through the mouth. So breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. Now, the third part of the 4-stage breathing, we're going to take a deep breath in through the nose. We are going to imagine that we're filling up our lungs, so expanding to all the areas that we didn't get to before. And then the fourth part, we're going to breathe out through our mouth and imagine we're pushing all of the air out of our mouths and out of our lungs. So we're going to do this 2 or 3 times, and I'll guide you through so you can keep your eyes open or closed. And so we're going to take a deep breath in through our nose and out through our mouth. And then we're going to take a deep breath in through our nose and imagine we're filling our lungs. And out through our mouth, pushing all of that air out of our lungs. Now let's try again. So in through our nose and out through our mouth. Now in through our nose, filling all those gaps in our lungs, and out through our mouth, pushing all the air out of our lungs. Now we'll do it one last time. So we're going to breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth. And then we're going to breathe in again. We're going to fill every inch of our lungs. And out through your mouth, really pushing all the air out of your lungs. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes, maybe take a moment, check in, see how you feel. I welcome you to do this breathing exercise in your own time if you need a moment to pause throughout your day. And so with that being said, let's get started with the content. So I'm going to just quickly do a quick recap here when it comes to what we went over to last session. So last session, we really went in depth into the types of thinking traps or cognitive distortions, often referred to as cognitive distortions. We talked about examples. We talked about how to kind of stop the thinking traps or stop the thinking patterns, depending on which one was being presented. So if you were here last session, you know that there was 10 thinking traps that we went over. We talked a little bit about the kind of challenging or modifying those automatic thoughts. We did an imagery technique. And we also talked about behavioral activation and why it matters. So really this session is building on the last one, and we're really going to focus on the behavioral activation or the behavioral change aspect of cognitive behavioral therapy. So we are going to dive right into what is self-efficacy. So it's interesting with self-efficacy. I oftentimes have clients say, you know, I just want to feel like I have autonomy over my life, or I want to feel like I can go out into the world and tackle the difficult things that come my way. And I think that's something that resonates with all of us. I know I feel that way often. I know family and friends feel that way. And so self-efficacy is actually something that's been studied scientifically. So cognitive behavioral therapists, psychologists have really looked into the background, about the impact it can have. So really what self-efficacy is it influences our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, and our motivation. And it also plays a kind of a critical role in shaping our perception of life experiences. So the concept itself is an individual's perceived belief that they can cope or deal or manage with an upcoming situation or problem. So the idea is that you feel like you can deal with, perhaps something that might come about in the future that might seem daunting when you're thinking about it, and knowing that you have the skills, the resources, maybe the coping mechanisms to really be able to manage it. And now it's interesting in the sense that a higher level of self-efficacy can actually increase an individual's belief that there's going to be a positive outcome to a situation. And this has been studied in depth by research scientists, and one most famous, Albert Bandura. I don't know if anyone watching is familiar with that name. He's a very famous Stanford psychologist. He's actually a UBC alumni, like myself, way back in the day. And he identified kind of 4 different areas of self-efficacy, which we will get into shortly here. All right, so you might be saying, okay, well, that sounds great, but how can I increase my self-efficacy? So one, the easiest way to start is to do some reflecting. So similar to our last session when we were going through the thinking traps, the first thing we want to do is be mindful. So we take a moment to pause and we want to reflect and say, okay, well, let's recognize some of the small wins that you've had in your life. And this is where I welcome you, if you have a notepad, piece of paper and a pen, to maybe write down something. So perhaps there's something that's sticking out in your mind. Oh yeah, I did really well, on that job proposal, or, I did really well in school on this certain assignment. So a small win. And the idea is that the more we identify the small wins in our life, the things that perhaps we overlook on a day-to-day basis, the more we gain a sense of mastery over it. So really, it kind of builds our confidence and builds our efficacy through self-mastery. So this is also kind of a way of saying that we're building resiliency, because oftentimes we look at the negative and we focus on the negative versus focusing on the positive in front of us. Now, we also recommend becoming curious about other people. So, perhaps there's people around you that have been through similar situations or been through really difficult situations that you're experiencing right now. And we welcome you to become curious about what it is that they've experienced. So, perhaps reaching out to them directly. If you can't reach out to them directly, maybe you can read about their story online and get a sense what was coming up for them. Really, that comes back to that common humanity that we as social beings have. And so becoming curious about others is a really great way to just slowly start to build that self-efficacy. Now, the third one is finding a role model. Now, this sounds a little bit cliche, but the idea is oftentimes if there's a task that seems overwhelming, seems really big, that's hard for us to imagine achieving, one of the best ways to kind of, again, build that efficacy and build that belief that we can do it and we can get there is by having someone kind of mimic that for us. And so the idea is that a role model can play a vital role in building our confidence and looking up to someone, admiring them, wanting to replicate their actions, perhaps their principles, their achievements, can kind of persuade us to behaviorally start to engage in some of those activities as well. And the fourth way is to tune into your body and mind more. So as we just did with our breathing exercise, one of the most important ways to really, deal with things head on and manage those stressful situations, or perhaps, achieve those goals that at the moment feel very lofty and overwhelming, is to pause. And that's something that I know is easier said than done. And I know this, being a clinician, I know that oftentimes I talk to clients about it and I have to catch myself because I need to do it as well. So, it's easier said than done, but really being mindful, being aware, and tuning into your body. So whether that's, just taking a moment to pause, doing an imagery technique, perhaps doing a body scan or a 4-stage breathing technique. And we can see that from the research science end that this is probably one of the most beneficial ways that individuals can achieve their goals or deal with things that are kind of, difficult situations. All right. So now we are going to dive a little bit into values. And so values are a really big thing within our company. I wish Dr. Samra was here because she could really kind of, highlight that for us as well. And I personally believe that values are so incredibly important in our lives. We oftentimes will use, the analogy of you are the CEO of your life, and a lot of the really successful companies in the world have values that they live by, that they abide by, that allow them to be successful. And so really taking a moment to pause and identify, well, what are your values? You as an individual, what is it that you kind of hold dear to yourself, that you kind of determines how you move through life? And so when you're talking about values, really we're talking about kind of the things that you believe are important in the way that you live and perhaps the way that you work. So the way that you live could be relationships, it could be friendships, it could be family, it could be a relationship with yourself, and then, work, school, and different areas like that. Now, the idea with values is that they actually determine your priorities. And, I think for a lot of individuals, also values are a way of kind of, identifying and measuring the things that are important to them as well. So some examples of values that I really appreciate and oftentimes will talk to clients about is one, acceptance. I think acceptance is a really big thing for a lot of people. So either being open to accepting, others, perhaps feeling accepted in your life by others. Adventure, I know this is one that I really enjoy. Adventure is for some people that's a pretty high priority value. They want to feel like they have opportunity to be adventurous in their life. For others, it may be authenticity. So that comes back to that self-efficacy, really being authentic to who they are, what they want, being true to themselves. For others, it may be compassion. Compassion is, one that we often hear, and that idea of acting with kindness towards others. It can also be connection. So, connecting, whether it's family or friends. And I know that's a really big one with the state of the world right now. And, sometimes we have to be a little creative about how we are able to get that connection. Thank God for Zoom. And so, what we're going to do is we're actually going to provide you with a handout that we give to clients. And so on the handout, you will get access to a list. I believe there's about 50 to 60 words, and they're all different values. And what I often recommend to clients is to go through and, perhaps print off the PDF or have it on your screen and, either highlight or maybe put an X next to some of the words that resonate with you. Oftentimes as we read, words just kind of stand out to us and jump out at us on the page. And that likely means that that's something that, would be a core value of yours or that you appreciate. All right. So you might be saying, well, this sounds great, but how do I identify my core values? How do I even go about, determining what it is that I want to value or say are my values? So when we're talking about defining personal values, really we're saying kind of what's truly important to you as an individual. And so oftentimes what we recommend is to look back on your life and think, when were the times that you felt really good? When was the time that you felt the most confident, that you felt like you were making really great choices? And so what we've done is we've laid out some easy steps here. So the first step is, one, identify a time when you were happiest in life. So for example, it could be, maybe happiest in your career, or it could be happiest when you're, in your personal life. And to help you kind of answer this, I want to ask you, what were you doing? Were you with other people? If so, who were you with during that time? Perhaps it was your partner or your kids or a friend, or perhaps you were on your own. So, just kind of really almost being critical about, okay, well, when was the time that I was the happiest? What was I doing? Who was I with? Where was I? And what factors do you think really was contributing to your happiness during that time? And then the second step, we are going to identify the times when you were most proud. So again, you can use examples from either your career or your personal life. And we welcome you to think, okay, well, what was it that you were proud of? Was it an accomplishment? Perhaps it was, you were proud of a partner, you were proud of a child, proud of a friend, proud of a promotion you got at work. So what were you most proud of? And what did other people say? And what did they share in your pride? Was there somebody there that was with you, that was, excited for you? And what other factors do you think really contributed to you feeling that level of pride? Now, step 3 is we want to identify the times that you felt most fulfilled and satisfied. And again, I welcome you to use examples from career and personal life. And so I want to ask you, what need or desire was fulfilled in that moment? What was something that was making you feel satisfied in that moment? And how or why did the experience give your life meaning? What was it about that experience that made you feel fulfilled? What was it about that experience that made you feel satisfied? And then we also want to ask, okay, well, what other factors contributed to your feelings of fulfillment? Perhaps there was something else going on in your life that really added to it as well. Now, the 4th step is really kind of reflecting. So as we talked through, and I will mention that we'll give you a handout so you can identify these on your own time as well. So hopefully I wasn't going too fast for people, but the idea is that, as we brainstorm, maybe jot some things down on a piece of paper, we can reflect and we can think, okay, well, what are, maybe our top 5 or top 10 values? And, oftentimes these questions about, okay, well, let's get some specifics, can help us determine what it really is that's important to us. And so that's where the other handout that we'll be providing you that has a long list of values, we welcome you to go through once you've done a little bit of reflection. All right, so we are going to go on to the next step. So we've talked so far about self-efficacy, kind of what it is, why it's important, and how you can go about increasing it. We've talked about values, what they are, why they're important, how you can identify them. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the actual behavioral change or the behavioral activation. Now, this is a very big part of cognitive behavioral therapy. And the idea is that so far each kind of part 1, part 2 we are building on, and so this is really about kind of putting things into motion when it comes to cognitive behavioral therapy and the techniques that we teach. Now, what we're going to do is the rest of the slides, we're actually going to identify some ways that you can change in a certain area of your life. So this is the area where I really welcome you. If you have a piece of paper or perhaps on your laptop, you want to write it down, we are going to walk through this step by step together. And this is something that we typically do, in session with clients, and it's a very common technique. So SMART goal setting is wonderful. I know Dr. Samra does it. I do it. It's a great way of going about kind of determining something that you want to, a goal you want to set for yourself. So the idea with SMART goal setting is that it's an acronym. So as you can see on your screen, it's an acronym. So the idea is the S is for specific, which we will get to in a moment here. The M is for measurable. The A is for attainable. The R is for relevant or realistic. And the T is for time limited. And so again, we're going to walk through each part of this, really the 5 kind of parts to the SMART goal setting together. So I welcome you to brainstorm as we go along. All right. So I'm going to give people a moment. I'm just going to pause for a moment because I don't want to go too fast here. So with step 1, we are going to determine the goal. What is it in your life that you would like to change, achieve, maybe do? Perhaps you want to set some New Year's goals a little bit early this year. And so the idea is we want to be extremely specific. Now with specific, really what is it? And what I love about cognitive behavioral therapy is we're very critical. We have to kind of, think about situations. So we want to be specific: the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. And so, for example, I'm going to use an example that I think a lot of people can resonate with. I know myself I can resonate with. And so back in the day, I used to run quite a bit. I used to be a runner. I want to get back into running at some point. That's my goal. So I'm going to use this as an example. So let's say that, I want to start by maybe walking. So this is the realistic, which we'll get to. So I might say, okay, well, I'm going to go for a walk in the park next to my house for 30 minutes a day. And the idea is, well, the who, I am going to go. The what, I want to go for a walk. The where, I'm going to go to the park next to my house. The when, maybe I'll say after work. In the morning, there's lots of things to juggle getting ready for work, so after work. And the why, well, the why is because I want to get back to where I was previously with running at one point. So the idea is to be really specific here and kind of walk through each area. And I'll give people a moment, so if they are brainstorming, they can write some things down. Right. So the next part is the M, which is measurable. So we want the goals that we set to be able to be measurable. So the idea here is that we want to say, okay, well, how will we know that we're making progress on this goal? So for myself, if I'm saying, okay, well, physical activity, I want to go for a walk. Eventually, I want to be able to run. I want to be able to go for a walk for maybe half an hour, maybe extend that to an hour, maybe start with a slow jog. And so really kind of that measurable idea of how am I going to know that I'm making progress? And also, how will you know when you achieve that goal? So for, going for a walk, well, maybe I've gone for a walk every day for a month and I can now change and start to go for a jog. And so the idea is, how can you measure progress? And when will you know that you've achieved the goal that you're setting for yourself? Right. So the next part is it attainable? So the idea here is really, is the goal realistic? Is this a lofty goal that perhaps feels a little bit too unrealistic for us? Or is it a realistic goal that we know we can achieve, but perhaps we need to be mindful of how long or, how we're going to go about achieving it? And also we want to ask ourselves, okay, well, do we have the skills required to achieve it? If we don't, can we develop them? And perhaps that's kind of the first step that we want to focus on. And so, for example, we want to say, in the situation of, is this a realistic goal for me to go for a walk every day? Yes. Do I have the skills? Yes, I believe so at this time. And, perhaps I could say that I'm going to take the dog with me as well. And again, it's kind of that accountability partner. So the idea is it realistic? Do you have the skills? And if not, can you develop the skills? All right. Now, the next part is is the goal realistic? So one, ask yourself, why am I setting this goal? Really start to kind of critically analyze what's coming up for you. And also ask, is it aligned with your values? So going back to the values work, what kind of guides us through life and how we move through life, is it aligned with those values? So with the example of going for a walk every day, I like, for myself, I like to be adventurous. I like to be active. So that aligns with my values. And it will align with my values of, getting to be a runner again one day. All right. So the next one is time limited, and this is the last aspect of SMART goal setting. So you want to ask yourself, what is the deadline that you are going to set for this goal? So the idea is, will you do this in a month, in 2 months, in 3 months? How will you know that you've achieved this goal? So reflecting again on how will you know if you've achieved this goal, and also, do you have enough time to achieve this goal? And if not, perhaps, being mindful of maybe extending that goal of the kind of deadline or due date that you're giving yourself. And so, thinking about my schedule, do I think that I could do a 30-minute walk every day? Yes, but perhaps every single day of the week, I might be mindful and say maybe 6 weeks versus a month. So the idea is really being kind of critical and analyzing and setting yourself up for success. All right. Now, what we're going to do, so we've gone through the SMART goal setting aspect of behavioral change. So as a quick recap, we've talked about, self-efficacy, what it is, how you can incorporate it into your life and why it's important, as well as values, what they are, how you can incorporate them and why they're important. We've talked about how to do SMART goal setting. So walking through, and again, this will be a handout that you'll receive, so you can actually write it out if you're interested in setting some SMART goals. Now with the behavioral change aspect, that's kind of incorporating all of these. So the idea is, when we're doing any sort of behavioral change, so perhaps we're setting a goal for ourselves, we've decided that we want to go achieve something, we're ready to do something, we're kind of ready to take that next step, we have to stop and pause for a moment and ask ourselves, are we really open to changing the behavior that we might need to change? And so this is where we say, kind of identifying your readiness to change is really important. Because oftentimes we tell ourselves, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to, go back to the gym. I'm ready I'm ready for that promotion. But when we kind of stop and take a moment to pause and really reflect, we might realize that, perhaps there's too many other demands going on in our life and it might make us feel burnt out. Or perhaps, there's other areas that we need to focus on at this time, and any other kind of goal setting might feel like too much pressure or too much for us to handle. Or you might say, yeah, I'm absolutely ready to change. It's a great time. I can make it work. SMART goal setting all sounds good. So ready to go. So the idea here is, before we begin, we want to ask ourselves, really, how ready am I? Is it the right time to make the change? And what are the pros and cons of changing? Oftentimes, when we're talking about, a specific behavior that we're looking to change, we might ask ourselves, well, what's the pro of doing that, and what's some cons of doing it? Some cons might be, well, it's out of our comfort zone. Some pros might be, well, maybe it's a health-focused behavior that we're looking to do. And I know we talked about kind of using the example of, perhaps sleeping in before. So the idea is, well, I could set my alarm clock on the other side of the room. A pro of that is I would have to get out of bed, and I'd be out of bed early. Maybe I could, check things off the list that I have to do for the day. A con is, well, my bed's warm and cozy, and I like sleeping. And so, kind of weighing the pros and cons. We really want to be critical of the situation. The next thing we want to do is we want to consider the benefits of changing. So, how can you begin to make the change in a realistic fashion? And again, it's really analyzing, being critical, breaking things down. Again, a part of cognitive behavioral therapy that I really love is the fact that it is so specific, and you really want to break things down as much as you can. And you want to ask yourself why. So, you might want to ask yourself, what would life be like if you don't make this change? And then you might want to ask yourself, well, what will life be like if you do make this change? And how will it be worth it? And then again, you might want to reflect, and does this align with the values that I hold near and dear to me? And so the next step, so step 3, is we want to identify any barriers that might come up. Now, for example, when we're talking about perhaps, let's use physical activity. We'll keep the theme going. So perhaps, and this is a big one for, the new year coming up, people are, I'm going to hit the gym and I'm going to go to the gym. And sometimes we set a little bit unrealistic goals for ourselves. So perhaps, less is more in that situation. And so the idea is, what are some barriers that could potentially come up for you that might impede your ability to achieve that goal that you're setting? So let's say it's, kind of physical activity, getting back into a workout routine. Well, perhaps, some barriers might be, working, family to take care of, laundry and things to do. And so the idea is, what are some things that could kind of stop you from setting that goal, from achieving that goal? And the idea is, we're not going to let these things kind of damper us or not allow us to achieve the goal, but we have to be aware of them in order to be creative about how we can go about dealing with them. Now, the next step is to actually go about changing the behavior that you want to change. And so this is like a big one, I think, for a lot of people, and I know myself included. It's always like, okay, well, I'll start that on Monday, or I'll start that next week when I have more time. And oftentimes what we know from a behavioral aspect, one of the best things you can do is start the change as soon as possible. So it doesn't necessarily mean starting it on a certain date, but really just starting it in the moment, deciding that's what you're going to do after you've done some reflection, and determine that it aligns with your values. And rather than saying, oh, I'll start this in the new year, I'll start this, next month, deciding, okay, well, I'm going to make this change and I'm going to start it right away. And then last but not least, we have one more step, but we want to revisit and revise. So, the idea here is really that kind of compassion and self-compassion side of things. So as we're setting these goals, we want that self-efficacy to be able to achieve things. We know our values, we've set some SMART goals, we've been making the behavioral change. And then we realize, okay, well, there's something not quite, maybe it's not quite clicking, maybe there's something going on. Perhaps, the goal is too lofty in the amount of time throughout the day that it's taking up for you. So the idea is to revisit it and revise. So perhaps that means that you extend the goal by a month, or you extend the goal by 2 months, or you make it less time throughout your day that you can focus on it. You want really like that ability to be kind of compassionate towards yourself and understand we all have very busy lives, you have lots of demands, and so the idea is to really kind of reflect upon, okay, well, how is this behavioral change going, and what can I do to change it more, to make it more beneficial and in the long run. And last but not least, you want to reward yourself. And so this should actually say step 6, reward yourself. But the idea is that, we want to give ourselves something to look forward to at the end. And so, and also being mindful of like what that reward is, something that you feel, deserving of and is healthy for you. But the idea is that we want to be able to have something that we can look forward to. So perhaps it's the goal itself, but then maybe something in addition that we really enjoy. And so throughout kind of everything we've talked about today, we really, and I know this has been a lot of information, so I'm happy to answer any questions, but it's really kind of that heavy behavioral activation. How do we change the behaviors that we have? We've talked about the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions. So A, being able to identify them. B, being able to change or stop them. We've talked about mindfulness and being aware. And then today's session is really about kind of, okay, well, how do we make that behavioral change and start to incorporate it? And so in our next webinar, we're actually, again, going to continue to build on the techniques that have been taught so far. And so in the next session, we're going to talk about informed decision-making. Again, how to enhance self-efficacy that way. Why practicing gratitude is not just a cliche, which I love. I think that's a great sentence. Why practicing gratitude is not just a cliche. The importance of mindfulness. And, oftentimes when people hear mindfulness, they think, oh, she's going to make me meditate for 10 minutes a day. That's not the case. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit more. We're going to talk a little bit more about what's called progressive relaxation, again, a very common technique in cognitive behavioral therapy. And we'll do some more kind of, talking about meditation and breathing techniques and how you can incorporate them on a little bit more of a common basis into your life and perhaps start to see the impact and really the power that just a grounding, breathing, a mindfulness technique can have in your day-to-day life. And so as I mentioned, really the first session was kind of an introductory to cognitive behavioral therapy, to those thoughts, those feelings, the behaviors. Last session was heavy focused on, identifying those kind of repeated negative thoughts, those thinking traps, cognitive distortions, how to stop them, how to identify them. Today's session was very behaviorally activated. And next session is really going to be wrapping it up by saying, okay, well, what are some other areas that we can focus on to really kind of have this be a new way of life for you and to incorporate into your day-to-day. And so, as mentioned before, we are very social media heavy. And so we have a presence on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. We have both Dr. Jody Samra, our Psych and Associates, and My Workplace Health. We have some great videos and content and blogs that we put out. So I welcome you to follow and like and subscribe. And I want to thank everyone for spending another Tuesday evening with me. I really feel honored that, people are taking time out of their busy schedules to join. And so I appreciate everyone that showed up today, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And thank you again. I hope the information served you well.